Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for following us online today. And today we have pleasure to invite Professor Barry Nalebuff from the Yale University. So it's really great to have you with us today, given we know it is late evening in the United States. So really appreciate for spending your valuable time with us today. So together with me, we also have Professor Ben, Dean of the Zhejiang University International Business School, to join us online today. So maybe first of all, I think it's really our great pleasure to invite Professor Barry, given as we know before you of course that you are the bestseller of the book, The Art of Strategy. And we got your book both in English and also in Chinese. This is the traditional Chinese version, but of course, I think the simplified Chinese version, the Mandarin version, is already China and also sold it very well. So I think it is really good to have you with us, and I think it is also our third time to talk about the game theory in the mid-author webinar. So the first one, we have the Al Winter from the Hebrew University to talk about the rationality. And Ben and I also had a conversation with Professor Robert Ullman just a few days ago. We talked about war and peace from the game theory perspective. So I think it's really good to have Professor Barry today that you are going to talk about the topic on negotiation. And I think it will be very interesting to get your perspective. How does the game theory or that the research you have been done, how does they apply to the negotiation? So if Professor Barry, you are ready, the floor is yours.
早上好，谢谢你们欢迎我到浙江大学。Delighted to have a chance to be with you. My background is I teach game theory, negotiation, and entrepreneurship. I've had a long interest in China. These are my daughters, Zoe and Chow Chow. I wanted them to learn Chinese. I couldn't find a normal camp for them, so I sent them to People's Republic PLA camp in Nanjing, where they could chirku and learn to be a little tougher. And so they grew up speaking Chinese. This is what a Tai Tai and what a Nuar, 在到 Shangri-La more recently. And as you know, my day job is being a professor at Yale. I write books. I have been an entrepreneur where I've started some different companies. One of them is called Honest Tea. That company, we've had some fun. This is President Obama drinking Honest Tea on his presidential desk. And he was kind enough to sign that for me. But we satisfy everyone's thirst. This is Ivanka drinking a bottle of Honest Tea. Today's talk is going to be about negotiation. I've worked with the NBA in terms of helping them. I like to say I work with the short billionaires negotiating against the tall millionaires. And I thought I would start with a game that if you've read The Art of Strategy, we can't really play, but if you haven't, we can. So the way this game works is that I've picked a number between 1 and 100, and if you get that number right on the first time, that's worth $100. The second time, 80, then 60, then 40, then 20, and then 0. Now the problem is I don't really have a good way of sending you money, but what I can do is send you one of my books in Chinese, and you get to pick. And these are, I think, simplified, so that will make your life a little better. And so you're not going to get 100 or 80, you just get 5 guesses. And if you get it right by the end, you're all good. And the game is real, and I'll even make it easier for you by telling you each time if you're too high or too low. So do we have the ability to have someone who is watching make a guess for us?
Right. So now we are starting the game, right?
Yes, I'd like to do that maybe with somebody who's on WeChat.
Right. Sure. Okay.
I can join as well.
You can, if you haven't read the book, that's fine, yes?
Yeah, I have not read the book.
So, Professor Barry, I think we are ready.
Okay, let's hear.
The audience just asked, for the number, do we have the limitation on that? For example, 0 to 100?
Yes, it is 1 to 100.
1 to 100. Okay.
Yes, Trebuchi.
Okay, the first one, 32.
Okay. Is that the person who made their first guess?
Yes.
Is you got lots of answers or just one answer so far?
So do we need to collect the answer by sequence or maybe?
Well, I'm just curious if that's one person or there are many people who are writing in with answers.
Right, so many people.
And what is the most common answer you're getting?
We don't really have the common answer, but we got 32, 57, and 96, and 23.
Wow. Those are unusual. Okay, well, we'll go with the first one. So 32 is too low. Taishao.
32 is too low. Okay.
So we have 4 guesses left.
Okay, 32. Okay, so for the next round, the answer I got is 47 and 53.
Well, you can't do them both. We're one at a time.
Only one.
Well, no, one at a time. I have to tell you each time if it's too high or too low.
Okay. So
I heard 47.
Yes, 47.
So 47 is too low, but let's wait a moment because the new guesses should wait until they've heard that information.
Right.
So anybody who guessed before hearing that should get a new chance to guess. So we have to just wait, dang-dang,
Okay.
to let people now they know that 32 is too low and 47 is too low.
Right. So 49.
49. 49 is too high, but now I think people know the answer. So the problem is anybody can guess now, so I don't know who to give this to. This was a very strange set of answers. Almost always what people do is 50, then 25, then 37, and 42. And I have no idea why the people in your audience were not doing anything like that. It was very strange. It was almost as if they were guessing at random rather than a formula. And this pattern of numbers is the right way to guess if the number was picked at random. But the number was not picked at random. I picked the number to make it hard for you to guess. And so that's why I picked 48. But somehow you were guessing in a way that I just don't understand. And so I'm going to give up and say this experiment did not work very well. Because my goal was to understand where you were coming from and to think about your perspective and then hopefully be one step ahead. And I did not succeed. Well, let's move to negotiation. And in particular, the idea I want to emphasize today is one idea, which is the notion of the pie. And what we're going to talk about is what is the pie, and then how it is that we go about splitting the pie. And the example I want to use is I have two people, Abe and B, and they have 9 to split up. But if they don't agree, they both get 0. And the question is, how much of the 9 should Abe get, and how much of the 9 should B get? And we can't really answer that question until we first know what happens if they don't reach an agreement. And in that case, what I'm going to tell you is that Abe will get 1 and B will get 2. And so now, perhaps through WeChat, we can get some answers. What do people think Abe should get, and what do people think B should get?
Okay, so the question is that Abe and Bei want to split the cake.
Yes, the pie in this case, but okay, the cake.
Right, the pie, okay. So, let me see.
And they have to agree. If they can't agree, they both get 0.
Right.
And the question is, how much will A get and how much will B get, knowing that if they don't reach an agreement, A will get 1 and B will get 2.
Right. So someone common maybe they want to get, if not by portion, they want to get 50 and 50. But
So 4.5. Bifurcate by.
Right. But someone say if by portion, as they wish, that it will be 3 and 6.
Okay, so
does that make sense?
Liu-san. 6 and 3.
Yes.
Or Sanliu. Okay?
Right.
And so I would say those are the 2 most common answers that I hear. But I think both of them are wrong. And the reason is that the 2 parties are not negotiating over 9. You see, if they don't do a deal, they can still get 1 and 2. And the reason to do the deal is to increase what they're getting from 1 plus 2 or 3 all the way up to 9. So they're really negotiating over an extra 6. And to get that 6, A needs B just as much as B needs A. And so therefore, I think that 6 should be divided 3 and 3. And therefore, A would get 4, and B would get 5. So that's my view of what's going on here. And the strange thing is that in negotiation, most people argue about the wrong thing. They don't understand what they're actually negotiating over. They think they're negotiating over the 9, whereas in fact, they're really negotiating over the 6. So the pie is what the 2 sides can create together, which in this case is 9, minus what A's BATNA is and B's BATNA, where A's BATNA is what A gets without a deal, and B's BATNA is what B can get without a deal. So in this case, it's 9 minus 1 plus 2. Now, there's a question of, okay, that was a nice idea, but can it really work in practice? You know, it's a simple theory, but is there any hope to it? What if the person doesn't believe in fairness? What if the person has never heard of the pie? Can we still make this work? And so, let me give you an example. In the United States, when you file for a trademark, it turns out that the moment you file for that trademark, it's public. And I had this friend who thought he would save some money by not hiring a lawyer to do the trademark for him. And as a result, he made a mistake. He did not buy the domain name before he did the trademark. And what he discovered when he went to buy the domain name is that it had been bought by a snake. Somebody who watched the domain names, the trademarks, and said, oh, I see that trademark, let me go and buy that trademark.com. And the person who bought that, well, we'll call him Edward because that was his name. My friend wrote to Edward and said, I understand you have the domain name. I'd like to buy it from you. And Edward wrote back saying, I'll sell it to you for $2,500. I'm sorry, we do not know that our domain is related to your trademark. Sorry if it made you feel bad. I also found the dispute process takes very time and cost wasting. So if you send me $2,500, we can give you the domain name. So Edward was trying to anchor at a high price, $2,500. I don't really believe that he was sorry about this, since I think he was doing this intentionally. And the first thing you want to do in a negotiation is understand your BATNA. And so what my friend said, well, look, the value of the website to him was very high. It was $10,000. But, in fact, he had another choice. What he did is he discovered that if you went to ICANN, which is the company that handles all of the domain names, that what Edward had done was called registration in bad faith. He was basically hijacking or taking the name hostage, and he would lose if it went to a dispute. And in fact, not only would he lose, you can see in red, he had lost many times in the past. He doesn't even bother fighting because he knows he's going to lose. But ICANN charges $1,300 to do the dispute resolution. And so Edward, if they didn't reach a deal, was going to get $0. And my friend was going to have to pay $1,300. So my friend here wrote to Edward and said, look, I feel bad you have the domain, but I'd feel worse paying you $2,500. I'd rather spend $1,300 and proceed with the ICANN process, which I'll win. So basically, if I paid you $2,500, that would be a mistake, because I would save money if I go to ICANN and you'll end up with nothing. So I suggest you take $500. If you feel bad, then this should more than cover your costs, and if you don't feel bad, then I'll do the dispute process. Okay. Edward writes back and says, sorry, $500 is too low. Considering the dispute cost, I kindly suggest we meet up at $1,100. And now what he's trying to do is put time pressure on the negotiation. Please confirm as soon as possible. Okay. So up till now, I would say this is standard negotiation. Kind of haggling back and forth. And at this point, my friend brings out the pie. And so what is the pie? Even though he values the domain at $10,000, he can get it back by paying $1,300. And so therefore, the pie is how much money he saves by not having to go to ICANN. And in order to do that, he needs Edward's help, and the two of them need to agree. Okay, Ming Bai, Bu Ming Bai.
Bye.
Ming Bai, okay? So, he says, here's how I see things. avoiding the dispute process will save me $1,300. That's what's available for the two of us. Under your proposal, I would end up $200 ahead and you'd end up $1,100 ahead. That's not fair. It would be like my offering you $200 and keeping $900. I'm willing to split the savings, buy funds or buy, $650, $650. But that's as far as I will go. That is, I will pay you $650. That will leave you $650 ahead of where you'd end up if I pursued the dispute, and I'll end up $650 ahead. Okay? So Edward writes back saying, let's meet up at $900. This is my final price. So he's now trying to make an ultimatum. If you cannot accept this, we have no choice. Remember, I started at $2,500. But the $2,500, in my view, is irrelevant because the move from $2,500 down to $13 counts for nothing. Because since there was an option of ICANN at $1,300, I don't care where he started because my friend was never going to pay $1,300 anything more than $1,300. And so what Edward is trying to do here is to go halfway between $650 and $1,100. But $650 is fair, $1,100 was not. And so halfway between unfair and fair is still unfair. So what should my friend do now? And what he did is he did not respond to the email at all. And 3 days later, Edward said, okay, we'll accept your deal. Now, why did Edward accept? Did Edward care about fairness? Absolutely not. Did Edward care about the pie? No. But if my friend could convince Edward that he cared about fairness and he cared about the pie, then he could convince Edward that $650 was the most he would pay. And there was no way for Edward to convince my friend that $1,100 or $900 was the most he would pay because those numbers are arbitrary. And so effectively the pie allowed my friend to make an offer and keep to it and stick with it. And then Edward had a choice, would I rather get $650 or $0? And he chose $650. As you may have guessed, my friend was me. And the company was called Make Real Foods, which you can go and find on Amazon and other places. And my other lesson to you here is that buy the domain name before you register for the trademark. Okay? And so here's a case where you can use the pie even when the other person doesn't care about it. Okay? It also says don't move away from 50-50. Because once you move away from 650, you go to 700, now you've said, I don't care about fairness. I'm willing to do things that are arbitrary. And so, therefore, you have no more principle, and so anything can happen. Let's try another example. So we have two people who are interested in buying a CD. A CD is a certificate of deposit. It's a financial investment. And if Alice buys it, she only has $5,000 to invest. And so $5,000 at 1% pays $50 of interest. Bob has $20,000 to invest. At 2%, that pays $400 of interest. And Alice and Bob together can buy a $25,000 CD, which pays 3%, or $750. And so my question to you is, how much of that $750 interest should Alice get and Bob get? And what do people think on WeChat?
Wait a moment, and
Okay.
perhaps
Could
Professor Ben, you want to share some of your feedback as well, and I will bring back from the audience.
Okay.
Well, based on based on Barry's, previous, I guess, principles of negotiation, I have worked out what I think Alice and Bob should get on top of what their previous, say, 50 and 400. Okay, so, but I'll leave it to the audience to decide. Okay, because I won't decide right now. So let the audience decide first.
Thank you.
Okay. So here I got a few of the answer, and maybe I pick up one first. The first one is that based on Professor Barry, your introduction in the very beginning for split the pie, and he think that Alice and Bob should at least take what they already own, 50 and 400.
Done run? Yeah, done run.
They invest together and they grow the pie.
Mm-hmm.
So how they are going to split is the remains 300.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the answer just stopped here. This answer did not continue. So maybe let's wait if someone want to explain how to split the pie of the remains.
That's perfect. That's a great answer.
Right.
But I would say, I believe that before today, almost everyone would have said Alice and Bob each earn 3% on the 750. So Alice gets 3% on 5,000 or 150, and Bob would get 3% on 20,000 or 600. They would divide things proportionately, not via the pie.
Right, exactly. We have three answers. Let's say Alice and Bob ratio get fairly 50-50 because this like a joint venture. They come
Yes.
right.
Yeah, that's great. It is like a joint venture, but only once you see things in terms of the pie. If you don't see that, you would have said what we should do is treat Alice and Bob the same way. And what that means is to give them both the same interest rate. And that means Alice gets 150 and Bob gets 600. But that is really treating money the same way, not treating people the same way. And the agreement is not between the money, it's between the people. And if you look at this, so for the pie story, as our audience person said, we don't do things proportionately. Instead, we realize that the pie is san bai qian, and so Bob gets 400 plus half the pie, and Alice gets 50 plus half the pie. And if you look at proportional division, consider the following example where Alice would make no interest on 5,000, Bob would make 2% on 20,000, and also 2% on 25,000. Now, it still makes sense for Alice and Bob to come together. But if you divided the $500 of interest proportionately, then Bob would get 400 and Alice would get 100. And that's not fair, because Bob is getting no benefit from Alice joining. And so, if Bob said to Alice, we should do things proportionately in this case, Alice could say, wait a second, if the numbers were like this, you would never agree to do it proportionately, because I would be getting all the gain. And so what we should do here is split the pie. The pie is 100, and so I should get 50, and you should get 50. And so Alice could convince Bob, by using this example, that in the previous case, proportional is not fair, and therefore go back to the case where Bob gets 400 plus 150 and Alice gets 50 plus 150. And that's pretty amazing, right? Because I took something which looked like it was really simple. And yet, I think I've changed the way that you see the world here. Okay. As I look at this, I'm not sure I have time to do this next case, so I'm going to just go through this.
Right. Professor Barry, here is the quick feedback. May we bring it to you?
Please.
Right. So this feedback is that Professor Barry, thank you for introducing this case and also help us to understand how to apply the theory to the real case. But the problem, as we know, that the game theory, one of the concept is the repeat game. So maybe this audience, what his perspective? Sometimes maybe when how we share the pie, we will also consider the repeated camp. So if we are going to meet these people next time, perhaps sometimes we will.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Right.
But I would say that there are many negotiations which are not repeated.
Right.
And the negotiation between me and Edward, I will never see him again.
Right.
And the example I'm about to give you is also not going to be repeated. And so, yes, things are more complicated if the game is repeated. I agree with that.
Right.
But if I can change your view of what the answer is for a single negotiation, I'm pretty happy with that. Because remember, I only have 35, 40 minutes to change your mind. And so that's not, I can't change your mind about everything. I can change your mind about one thing. So I, with Honest Tea, had a chance to negotiate with Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola had the ability to buy the plastic bottles that we were using at Honest Tea for less money. So we were spending 19 cents for each of these bottles, and they could buy the exact same bottle for 11 cents. So that's 8 cents savings, and at the time we were buying 100 million bottles. So that's $8 million a year. And the question is, how should that 8 million be divided between Coca-Cola and Honest Tea? Well, if you did proportional division, Coca-Cola sales were 40 billion and Honest Tea sales were 20 million. And so that ratio is 2,000 to 1, which means Coca-Cola would make 7,996,000 and Honest Tea would get 4,000. And that is, I don't know, hooly-hoo-too. It's crazy, right? Even Coca-Cola did not think that was reasonable. But if you want to show that something is unfair, taking it to the extreme often helps you in that way of doing things. So I said, look, I think we should divide it 50-50. We get 4 million and you get 4 million. And they said, well, what are you bringing to the table? We're bringing all of our buying power. What is Honest Tea bringing? And so, Hung Yi, why don't you see what people think Honest Tea is bringing?
Okay, the first one is Honest Tea bring like the branding because Honest Tea in terms of branding is healthy. So
yeah, but that's not part of this negotiation. It's not our branding. They're just giving us the bottles that they can buy cheaper than we can.
Right. Okay, let me
honesty brings the opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, so in particular, if I wanted to be funny,
Right.
I would say honesty brings our inefficiencies. Another way that I could be more serious is I could say honesty brings our customers. Because without the people who are drinking the 100 million bottles, there's no place to put their efficiencies. So only by combining their efficiencies with our customers can we save 8 million. And they say, okay, Barry, that was good, that was cute, but I think you've forgotten something. You see, for honest tea, $1 million is a lot of money, which is true. And so we'll give you 1 million and we'll keep 7 because for us, $1 million is not even a rounding error on a rounding error. It's just very, very little. And so, therefore, you should be happy to take 1 million. And my response is, oh, you don't care about money? Then we'll take 7, you can have 1, no one will notice. And so, one of the things that's true is that once you're in the pie world, we're getting some feedback here. Once you're in the pie world, every argument can be turned around. Everything is symmetric. Now, in the end, Coca-Cola decided that rather than just helping buy bottles, they would help us by buying the company. And we didn't really want to sell, but we agreed that they would buy the company from us in 3 years. And in the meantime, they would help with purchasing, with production, and distribution. And that created a problem because essentially they were going to help us increase our sales, but they didn't want to pay more for the help that they gave us. That didn't seem right? I'm going to help you and then pay for the help that I give you. And so the question is, how could we resolve that? And my response was that what you should do is pay full price on sales up to X, because we could get sales up to X without your help. And the reason we're working together is to get sales above X. And so for sales above X, you pay half price. That is, the pie here is the gains from us working together compared to me being just alone. And so let's make that pie big and let's split it. And we could fight about what X was, and we could fight about what the fair price was, but we could agree right away that we would split the pie. And in fact, we did. And then with their help, over those 3 years, our sales went from 20 million to 75 million. And now they're close to 500 million. And so it has worked out for everyone. So here are my conclusions. If you use the pie, you'll understand what it is you're negotiating about. It makes things simple. It makes things fair. The pie is the value that's created by an agreement. The negotiation is about the 6. It's not about the 9. That when you're negotiating about the pie, every argument can be turned around. And there, any time somebody proposes an uneven split one way, you can propose a split the other way. That other than you and my students, almost nobody has heard about the pie, so you're going to have to educate them and persuade them. And indeed, a good way to start a negotiation is to say, I'd like to use the pie, and make that the ground rules for the negotiation. So we have one principle here, which is equality, but the question is, what is it that we're treating equally? Proportional division treats each dollar the same way, but the pie treats each person the same way. So I've doubled your options, and if you'd like to learn more about this, you can take my course on Coursera, which is free, at coursera.org/learn/negotiation. So again, thank you for this opportunity to share these ideas with you. And let's go to questions and feedback.
Thank you, Professor Barry, for really give us the comprehensive landscape in terms of negotiation and what kind of the principle. Because I think a lot of the reader in China read your book, The Art of Strategy, which you pick up so many compelling cases in terms of how to split the pie and also how to grow the pie and how people should negotiate. So I think really appreciate that you sum up those few principles that we can apply to many of the cases, which is universal. So really appreciate for that. So with that, I want to turn to Professor Ben. Given Professor Ben, we know prior to working with Zhejiang University, you were working with investment bank for many years, and you also lastly worked with JP Morgan as China CEO. So we will very much like to get your perspective. For example, the feedback for Professor Barry, and also do you see any of the difference between the negotiation between the Western or Oriental culture, consider the cultural context? So Professor Barry.
Thank you, Hongyi, and Barry. Thank you very much for sharing with us the fascinating stories and tales. And when I was in industry, as Hongyi mentioned, I did learn something about so-called strategic negotiation. But honestly, I must say, I don't always apply them very often to the so-called everyday decision makings. Hongyi mentioned in terms of culture, I was noticing that the book you have, when it is translated into Chinese, somehow they didn't mention the competitive edge in the Chinese version. Okay. So they just said competitive strategies. I don't know whether it's because the translator was just didn't see the difference, or maybe because he was smart, that in the Chinese culture, they say you don't always want to take advantage of people. You don't want to give the people the impression that you want to gain an edge, gain advantage of the other person, okay? So that's probably some of the times that when I was doing the negotiation, I am terrible in negotiation because negotiation can be messy, can be costly, and sometimes actually can be unpleasant sometimes, okay? Because people perceive fairness in a very different way. So that's why I think to a certain extent, when you apply the negotiation, the game theory, you want to make sure there are some, differences between different contexts, different cultures, and also between a transaction-based negotiation and a relationship-based negotiation, and so on and so forth. So, but I just want to thank you, Barry, for the fascinating sharing. Even though sometimes I don't always want to apply the negotiation in my real life, but I think it's a really good case study, for many of our business school students. Okay.
Well, thank you. I think one of the reasons why people dislike negotiation and why it is messy and unpleasant is because they don't have a theory. And then I think something is fair, and you think something else is fair. And as a result, I feel like I'm being treated unfairly. Proportional division, which is the typical answer, I think really is unfair. But people don't, because they don't understand that the negotiation is over the 6, not over the 9.
Yeah.
In the end, that's why there are hard feelings. And if you take the Coca-Cola example, where it's 2,000 to 1, people realize it's just crazy. And so, if both sides can understand the pie, then both sides can have the same view of what fairness is. And I would say that prior to this approach, if you go to the CD example, no one would have done the 50 and 400 plus 150 each. But after you see this, both sides recognize that's the fair outcome. And it's not just fair, it's also equal power. Because you can't get that outcome without both sides agreeing. And people think just because you're small, you have no power. Or just because you have a bad BATNA, you have no power. But actually, go back to that case where the small person has no interest on her 5,000. But without her help, you can't go from 400 to 500 of interest. And so she has a bad BATNA, but she still needed to get the extra 100 of interest. And I've given this talk to many investment bankers, and they don't like it. And the reason they don't like it is because generally the proportional division helps them, because they're getting more than their fair share. And okay, and so there's a question of whether or not you want to share this if you're the bigger party. And one view is, I may get a little bit less, but I will close more deals. And I will have a reputation for being fair. The other view is, no, if the side will take proportional, I'll just keep quiet and see if I can get more than half. But understand that if they don't really feel they're being treated fairly, they may not work with you as well to make the pie big. And they may not have the vocabulary to explain why they feel they're being treated unfairly. And so, and if they are able to give you the theory of the pie, I don't think there's a counter argument against it. And so I think you have to accept it, or you have to say, nope, I'm going to be unfair. I'm just going to take advantage of you. And the end result is the other side say, well, I don't want to do business with you then.
Well, indeed, in many of the, difficult negotiations in business, many of the people in the Chinese culture and context can get too emotional. They lose sight of the principles, and they probably wouldn't work out the 300 versus 3 versus 6, okay?
Yeah.
As to what is available for negotiation, what we're talking about, So.
Yeah, so it's clear that I am providing a very logical approach to negotiation. If you like to watch Star Trek, I am like Mr. Spock. I'm like Vulcan in the sense of the very logical approach. And Captain Kirk is the emotional approach. And the goal is to combine logic and emotion, if you like. And I would say that there has been too little logic applied to the theory of negotiation and too much emotion. And the good news is that when you're making negotiations over large deals, hopefully you're dealing with professionals. And you can say, look, I've given you, I respond to a logical argument. If you tell me something where I'm wrong, I will agree with that. But I don't want to be yelled at and bullied and pressured. And so, and I think that's one way to help reduce the emotional aspects of negotiation.
Maybe I can ask another question. I think in today's world, the digital economy, the big techs, it's always they are dominant players. From the US, you have Facebook, you have Amazon, and in China you have Alibaba and Tencent. They are dominant players. When they are actually kind of like negotiating with the average Joes, like a typical user like mine.
Yeah.
We don't get there's always a argument as to who gets more of the benefit of the, say, data and all the things about the ecosystem and platform.
Yeah.
So view about that,
Well, I think everything I've done today has just two people. And the problem is that when you're negotiating with Amazon, Amazon is on one side and there's lots of people on the other. And if Amazon doesn't do a deal with me, they can do a deal with somebody else. And so, look, Honest Tea was small and Coca-Cola was big. And so you could say, why should it be 50-50? And the reason was that Coca-Cola, as you said, needed our inefficiencies, needed our customers. But if there are many people selling the same thing, then the pie is really small, because my BATNA is, instead of doing a deal with B, I could do a deal with C or D or E. And so that's part of the problem. And effectively, it's not really even negotiation. I would say it's price taking. Because when you're large, you can just set a price and there's no need to negotiate. And so that's part of the problem. Because if you're a commodity, that really means that without you, the pie does not get any smaller. So think about the pie as, if I don't do this deal, how much worse of a deal is the other side going to do? And the answer, for the most part, is about the same. And that's even true with data. Because the issue is, if Amazon or Alibaba gets enough data about other customers, then they don't need my data to figure out what it is that I want, because they know I'm like somebody else. And so therefore my data is worth almost nothing to them. And that's a big problem.
Thank you. Thank you, Barry.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Ben, for your feedback and also your insight. And also thank you very much for Professor Barry, your answer for that. So with that, we also got a few questions from the audience. The first one is that the reader of your book comment that he really liked the chapter 8 of the art of strategy, which is interpreting and manipulating information. Because I mean, like life in the reality, every day we are getting the signal, the information. So as you addressing issue in terms of signal and also MBA degree, as we know that nowadays MBA degree, almost a lot of people, they hold their MBA degree. So if for the people, when they want to enter to the job market in the digital era, what kind of like the signal that you think that they should prepare for that signal?
Well, I think that one of the strange things about the world is that for some reason people seem to do better studying in person rather than online. And I don't really know why, because in theory I could just give you my book and say, go read it. And somehow, if I'm telling you what's in the book, the information comes across better than just reading it. We've had books for thousands of years, and yet apparently we need to bring people in to have the people who write the books explain what's going on. Why, once I've taught you how to read, why do we need the extra part? The thing about business is that you need to have all the different components. You need to understand marketing and strategy and operations and human resources and accounting and finance. And that is a very broad set of skills. Normally in education, you get narrower and narrower as you go up the chain. But in business, we want you to go broad so that you have a general understanding of what's going on. And also you meet friends and make networks and colleagues at management school. So I think the good news is we're not about to be put out of business, because this pandemic was a test for us. And it turns out our students hate taking these classes online. And we even have executives who were traveling to come to us. And we say, look, we can save you all this traveling time. And they say, no, we want to come to campus. And so we got to run the experiment, and people didn't like it. So I'm not so worried that we're about to be put out of business even by these online courses. That said, I think my negotiation course online is every bit as good as my course in person. There's another aspect of the person's question which I think is relevant to negotiation, which is oftentimes people hide information in a negotiation. And they hide information because if they think they tell the other side what it is that's going on, that will be used against them. But I believe in a negotiation, the goal should be to give the other side what the other side wants. Because if they get what they want, you can get what you want. And I can't give the other side what they want if they don't tell me what they want. And the other side can't give me what I want if I don't tell them what I want. So in order to have a pie, you need to explain to somebody what it is that you want. And I'll give you one quick example. In a negotiation about selling a gas station, the couple is hoping to take a trip around the world. That's what they're going to do with the money from the gas station. Okay? Should they tell the seller that or not? It seems like it's frivolous. So is there any reason to hide that information?
Maybe it also depends. If that will be the repeat games, obviously.
Well, there's no repeat game. You're never going to buy another station from this couple again.
Right. Professor Ben.
I may have missed the earlier part of that. Okay.
So the couple is selling a gas station, and what they want to do is take a sailboat trip around the world with the money from the station. Should they keep that information hidden or not?
Hidden to whom? To their partner?
To the buyer.
To the buyer. I think it. For me, I think it doesn't matter, because how I am going to use the money I sell the gas station is my choice.
So a lot of people. Oh, go ahead, Ben.
I probably would not disclose my plan afterwards.
So a lot of people are like Ben, but here's the thing. There has to be some reason why you're selling the station, because there is a for sale sign. There are bad reasons and good reasons from the buyer's perspective. A bad reason is there's a leak in the tanks and there's going to be a toxic waste site. Another bad reason is that there's going to be a competitor opening up across the street. And so, from the buyer's perspective, the fact that you want to take a trip around the world is as good a reason as they could have. And so they will be happy to hear that. That's good news from their perspective, not bad news. And so people take information like that and they're scared because they think, oh, it's going to put me in this weak position. But the fact is, it actually puts you in a stronger position. And it turns out, they often say, oh, I'm planning to retire. But the person who's selling the station, you say, well, what are they going to do 2 years later when they come back? And the answer is they still need a job. And they're very good managers, and the buyer would be happy to hire them. But if they say they're going to retire, the person won't offer them a job. But if you say, I'm going to take a 2-year trip around the world, they say, well, what happens when you come back? And then we can offer you the job. And so people are so scared to tell the other side information that they don't actually get what they want because they haven't told somebody what it is they want. Let me try one other example for you. Imagine that I am negotiating with Hung Yi, and there is a deadline 1 week from today, Friday at noon. And if we don't get an agreement by Friday at noon, we both get 0. Okay, Ling Dan for both of us. But it turns out my deadline is Wednesday at noon. And Hong Yi does not know this. Should I tell him or not?
So the original deadline is Friday, but the actual deadline is Wednesday.
Only my deadline, not yours. So should I tell you that my deadline is Wednesday at noon or keep that secret?
I will tell the other side.
And why would you tell the other side? Wei Shama.
This will probably help accelerate negotiation and give the person the visibility about potential actions and the level of commitment.
But it's putting me in this weak position because it says I need to do this by Wednesday at noon. And so, therefore,
I'm sending a very, indeed, that might put me in a weaker position, but in the meantime, I'm sending a very strong signal to the other side.
And Hong Yi,
if it can be done, it has to be done by Wednesday, that deadline, Yeah.
Hong Yi, do you agree?
Yeah, on the one hand side, maybe I will want to hide the information, but on the other hand side, it will also make me in very dangerous situation. If that we cannot work and deliver the result before the Wednesday.
Well, you see, my deadline is Wednesday at noon.
Right.
When is Hong Yi's deadline?
Friday, right?
No.
No problem.
It's also Wednesday at noon.
Right.
Because if I can't get an agreement by Wednesday at noon, you can't get an agreement by Wednesday at noon. You just don't know it. And so if I keep it quiet, I'm going to feel under great pressure come Wednesday morning, and you are not. And so, again, this is my point about symmetry, that we always have the same deadline. And I'm sitting there afraid because I think, oh, it's going to put me in a weak position. But the answer is, it's only going to put me in a weak position if I don't tell someone. And so I try and keep things hidden, whereas in fact, and the last example I'll give you is I'm advising somebody, and it turns out that they were offered a deal and they said no to that deal. And now they're talking to somebody else. And they want to lie to the other person and say this other deal is still alive. Because they think by saying that other deal died will put them in a weak position. And my view is you can say to the other party, look, I said no to that price. And so I'm not going to say yes to you to that price. If I wanted that price, I would have done the deal over here. And so you have to beat that price. And you can't just beat it by a little bit because they weren't close. And so one view is I'm weak because I don't have another option, but I can also say it's strong. I'm strong because I showed you I can turn that down. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Barry. May we add one last question for you?
可以.
Okay. So the audience is want to ask, because we're talking about a lot of like the negotiation apply to the business transaction or to make a deal. So how about the negotiation apply to the family or apply to the close relationship? Will it be different? Because in your chapter 8, you talk about that the tattoo can probably help that to for the people who doesn't want to marry you, maybe a signal, or like you can help you to screen. So how would you like to suggest or advise people to apply this negotiation theory in the close relationship?
I'll answer. By the way, the picture that you see behind me is the Yale School of Management. Right. And the school was designed by Sir Norman Foster, who did the Beijing airport. And in fact, we often call the school, Terminal Number 4. And the Yale mascot is a bulldog, which is what you see here. So I think that negotiation in families really depends on fairness. That people will be very upset to be treated unfairly inside a family. And so, even though the stakes may be small, having a theory that allows you to make sure that everyone gets half the pie, I would say is especially important. So the stakes may be low by comparison, but people really care about being, especially two brothers or brother and sister or parents and kids, about the idea of being treated fairly. I can also say that, in society, it matters a lot too. That there's a store, I wonder if I have this. There's a view that we can take a small pie and by working together as a society make it into a bigger pie. And what some people think is as you go from the small pie to the bigger pie, everyone should get their same proportional increase. So China has this much and they should go to that much. US has this much and goes like this. And I think that's really wrong. I think that what we need to do as we go from the smaller pie to the bigger pie, as we do global warming, for example, we need to share those gains equally, not proportionately. Because we need everyone to come together to make that happen. And that's one of the reasons why we have such conflict in the world, is that we are basically treating dollars the same way rather than people and countries the same way. And so when we think about fairness inside the family, we can also think about it much more broadly around the world.
Thank you.
Maybe I can jump in. I think, Barry, if you were the president of the United States, and you apply the principle you just mentioned about fairness, I think the world will be in a much more harmonious state, I think.
Oh, Danran. And look, I think one of the great tragedies of President Trump is that he does not understand how to negotiate. His view is that in order for me to succeed, you must fail. And that is just not true. he has no view of making the pie bigger, and he has no view of splitting the pie evenly. And when you take that approach, the opportunities to solve problems and work together fundamentally changes. And I don't think we can ever change him because he doesn't care about learning. But the good news is,
he went to the wrong school. He should have come to Yale School Management. Okay.
well, he went to the wrong school and he never learned anything from them. So, when I would say, but hopefully, it looks like we have a new president who actually does care, and so I will keep my fingers crossed.
Okay, thank you, Professor Ben and Professor Barry. And I just have a short feedback for Professor Barry in terms of fairness of family. I kind of disagree with that because a few weeks ago, when I had a conversation with Professor Mao Logian to talk about 2030, and he expects that in 2030, maybe 60% of property in the world is going to owned by the female. But I disagree with him. I say, in my family, my wife say, what your property you own is my property, and my property is still my property. So sometimes maybe the fairness is not always applied to the close relationship.
By the way, look, when one of the funniest things that happened is I gave this talk to a group of investment bankers, but their wives, some of their wives were there too.
Yes.
And one of them said, "Oh, this will help me in my divorce." In terms of what is the pie I helped my husband create, and I'm entitled to half of that. So there you go.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Barry and Professor Ben, for both of your valuable time. I think we really enjoyed the conversation with both of you. And I think I'm also kind of agree with Professor Barry that you say some students still feel to learn face to face or in person is much more helpful. At least I think when every time after we had this webinar, when I read a book, I have very strong impression that the example you pick up today, and I think that is very helpful. So thank you very much once again. And both Professor Ben and I, and the faculty member and the student, hope we have pleasure to host you in the near future. Once again, either online or maybe a trip to China to our university in Zhejiang province.
I've been to Hangzhou. It is beautiful, and so I hope one day to see you, and I hope you will also be able to share the link to the Coursera site with all of the people who've been here.
Right.
Okay.
I'm one of your 300,000 online students.
Okay, good. Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Barry and Professor Ben, and stay in touch.
Okay, 再见. Man manzo.
Jim.
Okay, bye.